You know, they say that complexity is the refuge of the scoundrel. And so often when governments make programs unnecessarily complicated, it's not out of incompetence, it's because somebody stands to benefit from all of the complexity. We know that with the We controversy, for example. The Prime Minister claimed he wanted to help young people serve charities, and he needed a program to do that. Well, we already had a program called the Canada Summer Jobs Program. The problem for him, though, was that it was delivered by public servants, not by his friends. And so he created this phony oxymoronic concept of the paid volunteer so that he could justify outsourcing this pre-existing program to an organization that just happened to have paid $500,000 to his family. Well, this weekend we learned that more unnecessary complexity benefited a firm with links through its executives to the Prime Minister's office. The Prime Minister the government created a rental assistance program, which the Canadian Federation of Independent Business says has been a disaster, helping barely 15% of businesses. You'd think that all businesses would be in need, given that they were shut down for almost 100 days during the COVID crisis, but only a very small minority were able to access it because it is so complicated and confusing. And what made it so complicated and confusing is that it was outsourced to a government corporation that has no involvement whatsoever in commercial rent. CMHC, which is strangely running this program, exists for the sole purpose of providing affordable housing, not commercial real estate. And of course, that agency was not able, therefore, to deliver the program and needed to subcontract it. And who got the subcontract? Well, a firm whose senior vice president is the spouse of the Prime Minister's chief of staff. Now, of course, the easy way to deliver this program would have been through CRA. CRA already had a program stood up to deliver a wage subsidy. Businesses just needed to apply, showing their revenues were down 30%, and they could get up to 75% of their payroll reimbursed by CMHC. All the machinery is in place. There's an application portal. CMHC has the ability to deposit monies directly into the accounts of small businesses, and nothing would have been different here. Businesses would simply have shown that they met the eligibility by demonstrating their revenues were down 70%, submitting their rent bill to CRA, and CRA could have deposited the money in their accounts. But no, strangely, the government said, we won't go through the established mechanism that's already in place. We will give it to a Crown corporation that has no experience whatsoever in commercial real estate, and that corporation will, of course, have to contract out the administration. And who will get the contract? Well, we find out that it's a company whose senior vice president is the Prime Minister's chief of staff's husband. Now, this contract is at least $56 million. Right now, it looks like the administrative costs that the company will receive is worth almost 10% of the full value of the program. An enormous amount of administrative and servicing burden that, of course, could have been avoided had CRA been used. So Conservatives today are calling for the Finance Committee to examine why this program was directed through an unrelated Crown corporation and ultimately to this company. And two, we are asking the lobbying commissioner to ascertain if either the company, MCAP, or Mr. Silver should have registered their lobbying activities and whether they did so. Once again, we see Canadians are suffering. Everyday people are struggling just to keep their heads above water. Meanwhile, our country drowns in a $343 billion deficit. Our debt is up by 50% in 1 year. Our economy will take a $100 billion hit this year. And what is the Prime Minister focused on? Not on getting Canada through this crisis or rebuilding our economy, but on helping his friends, helping his cronies, and creating programs that are so complicated that only the most sophisticated with the best lobbyists and consultants can benefit and profit. So I now turn the floor over to the Shadow Minister for Ethics, Mr. Michael Barrett.
Good morning. Thanks very much to MP Poilievre. And we're moving through our summer. A lot of Canadians are coming off of a week of holidays, and more revelations about the scandal-plagued Liberals and their inconsistent stories and trying to explain away what has now turned into a summer of scandal. We found out just this week that the only firm in Canada that was to deliver we were told could deliver on the summer job program, the parallel program to the existing Canada Summer Job Program, that they couldn't deliver it anywhere where French was spoken, and they needed to subcontract it out. So the entire province of Quebec required that it be subbed out. Any French-speaking community in Canada would require that subcontractor to deliver the program. This is the same organization, the WE organization, who was going to subcontract out recruiting participants. They were going to have teachers in communities during their summer invite them to use their contacts through the schools to get students involved in this program, putting a tremendous conflict in front of those teachers should they have taken the organization up on the ask. We also know that the organization was outsourcing all of the development of all of their online resources as well. So the organization, we're told, was the only one, this WE organization, that could deliver on this program for students. They were going to subcontract it out. They were unable to do it. Meanwhile, we had Canada's Professional Public Service, who we've heard a committee from their union representative was willing and able, and in fact wasn't asked if they could deliver on the program. We know that this $500 million program was awarded to a firm that gave $500,000 in benefits to members of the Prime Minister's family. $500,000 for $500 million. We know that when the finance minister's officials and when the finance minister were involved in this, that he had taken $40,000 in free trips from the WE organization. And the day before he was called to testify, suddenly had a flash of recall and was prepared to wave his pen and pay that money back. Illegal vacations. We know that the Prime Minister, when he came to testify before committee, and we were told that we should be very impressed with this unprecedented appearance by a Prime Minister at a parliamentary committee, and only unprecedented because we have an unprecedented situation and a Prime Minister twice found guilty of breaking the law that he is again being investigated for contravening. That he comes before committee and suddenly reveals, I pushed back, I pulled this off the cabinet agenda, seeing that there would be a perception of a conflict, and he went ahead and approved it anyway. But during that time of due diligence, supposed due diligence by the Prime Minister's office, they didn't uncover that bank covenants weren't being met by this organization, that their board had been fired or resigned, and that their employees had been laid off in massive numbers. We've heard that the Prime Minister and ministers are sorry. Well, sorry means that they need to take responsibility for this. We haven't seen that yet. The Finance Minister has said that he accepted illegal vacations, and based on the Prime Minister's actions, that's okay. It's without consequence. This program is an unmitigated failure, delivering no jobs to students. With the administration fee paid to the WE organization, not yet fully repaid to the Government of Canada and Canadian taxpayers. But no one in Cabinet is held responsible. The Prime Minister has said he's not responsible, and he is thus far unwilling to hold any of his ministers responsible. Well, that's unacceptable. This week at the Ethics Committee, we will hear testimony from ministers, expecting to hear from the clerk of the Privy Council, and we'll have questions for those that do appear. The Prime Minister has been called to appear before the Ethics Committee and has yet not accepted that responsibility that he has to attend. So we'll see this week the transparency that members of the government are willing to provide to Canadians. There are certainly many questions left unanswered, and as the days go by, there are more questions that arise, more inconsistencies in their story. The truth must come out, and this week, the official opposition, Canada's Conservatives, will continue their work to get the truth for Canadians. Thank you very much.
We'll now start the question period. As usual, one question, one follow-up. Comme d'habitude, une question et une question de suivi. We'll start with a question on the phone and then turn to the room. Opérateur, première question au téléphone.
Thank you. Please press star one if you have a question. S'il vous plaît, appuyez sur l'étoile 1 si vous avez une question. La première question de Mary Walsh, Globe and Mail. The first question from Mary Walsh of the Globe and Mail.
Hi there. I'm wondering if you can explain to me what, if anything, you think is wrong or inappropriate with the rent relief program being administered by the company that employs Rob Silver.
Well, to start with, it may seem like an administrative detail, but it's fundamental to both the WE scandal and today's controversy. And that is that we already had, within the public service, the capacity to deliver this. We know that because CRA is already delivering the wage subsidy. Why couldn't CRA simply have delivered the rent subsidy? The two have very similar mechanisms of delivery. The business applies, CRA deposits the money into the bank account of the business. There's vast IT systems, there's data, there's access to direct deposit, all of the things that you would have needed to deliver a rent subsidy to businesses in need already exist within CRA. But once again, just like in the WE controversy, the government directed the project outside of the relevant department in order, it appears, to favor a private interest at the cost of the public interest. So we want to know how that decision happened. Who pushed this multi-billion-dollar program out of the department where it belonged so that it would be contracted to a company that just happened to have as its senior vice president the husband of the Prime Minister's chief of staff. We want to know everything that led up to that decision. We want to know who in the PMO was involved in doing that. There are serious consequences for Canadians. The program's a disaster because it's been contracted out. It has helped a tiny minority of businesses that needed it, and roughly 10% of the costs are going to be gobbled up by administrative fees. So that's a summary of why we think that the government was wrong in directing this program to a business that had the Prime Minister's chief of staff's husband as its senior vice president.
And as a follow-up, neither Mr. Silver nor MCAP Mr. Silver is not registered as a lobbyist. MCAP does not have any registered lobbyists. Have you already sent a request to the lobbying commissioner for an investigation? And why does that matter if the CMHC says that Mr. Silver was not involved in the negotiations around this? So the first question is, have we sent a request to the lobbying commissioner? No, we intend to do that tomorrow. And you say, why does it matter? The answer is that we need to know if Mr. Silver or MCAP did any communications that are with any part of the federal government that they should have registered for, and if they did such communications, did they register? We can't find any evidence of registered lobbying activity. We know that Mr. Silver did meet with CMHC, the agency that was strangely contracted to deliver this program. He met with them on June 22nd. I could not find any registry of that meeting. that we need to know if that meeting did involve lobbying. If it did, then one ought to have registered. But we don't know yet, and we're going to ask the lobbying commissioner to find out.
Opérateur, prochaine question au téléphone.
La prochaine question est de Libertium de la presse canadienne. The next question is from Libertium from the Canadian Press. Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to ask about the documents that were supposed to be tabled with the Finance Committee. Can you say whether those documents have been tabled as requested by the committee, and have you seen them? Have you been given access to them?
They have been. The government has shared some documents with the public servants at the Finance Committee, but they are being vetted to make sure that no cabinet confidences or personal information is included in the text we receive. So once the public servants at the Finance Committee have had a chance to review the documents, they'll be given to us, but we don't have them yet.
Okay. And on the issue of Rob Silver and the rent program, I understand that Katie Telford basically recused herself from that decision, put up some I guess walls to not be involved in that decision. Is that your understanding as well? And does that have any impact on your views of this case?
Well, it depends what decision you're talking about. She says that she created an ethical wall to avoid being involved in whenever her husband's company came up. That may or may not be true. We'll take her at her word. But there's another decision, and that is the decision to take this program and hand it over to a Crown corporation that had no ability to deliver it. And we want to know who in the PMO is involved in that. Because that was ultimately the decision that led this company to get the contract. When the government gives a Crown corporation a job it can't do, then that Crown is going to have to subcontract it to someone. And we want to know who directed this to CMHC when clearly CMHC had no ability to deliver it. This easily could have been delivered through CRA. CRA is already delivering similar programs. I want to know who in the PMO intervened to reroute this program over to this agency, which required it be subcontracted. And of course, the company that got the subcontract has a senior VP that is married to the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff.
Opérateur, prochaine question au téléphone.
Thank you. La prochaine question est de Annie Bergeron-Oliver de CTV National News. The next question is from Annie Bergeron-Oliver from CTV National News. Please go ahead.
Hi there. You mentioned that you want the Finance Committee to launch an investigation. I'm just wondering, who do you intend to call, and what specifically are you hoping to get out of an investigation in terms of information and in terms of the government's response to it?
Well, we want all the players who are involved in this contract to be summoned to testify. That would include Mr. Silver. It could include Ms. Telford. It will almost certainly include CMHC. What we want to find out is why this multi-billion-dollar program was hived off from the public service, given to a Crown corporation that couldn't run it, and therefore subcontracted to a company that has as its senior VP the spouse of the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff. That's what we want to know. We also want to know why the program has been such a complete and utter disaster, with almost no businesses benefiting. Because I think 15%, and clearly the program was designed not to help small businesses get through the shutdown, but to favor the interests of those who are close to the Prime Minister.
Do you have
okay,
a follow-up?
Great. And I do, sorry. You have called on the Prime Minister to resign, but if that happens, it would likely mean there would need to be an election down the line. But a new Nanos poll says that a majority of Canadians don't want an election at all during COVID-19. So I'm wondering, without the public support behind an election, is the opposition's ability to hold the government to account weakened?
No, we are not asking for an election. We have never asked for an election. We are using the tools that Canadians gave us by making us the strongest and biggest official opposition in 4 decades to hold the government to account. We are using the tools of a minority parliament where opposition parties have a combined majority to force answers to questions. We want Parliament to be an accountability machine. That's what Canadians elected, and that's what they're going to get.
We'll now turn to the room. CBC.
Hi, thanks for holding this avail. David Thurton from CBC News. Are you really calling this incident involving Katie Telford and her husband a scandal? It seems like you just have more questions and you're not yet calling it a scandal, even though you billed this at this news conference as a summer of scandal, the summer of liberal scandal. So is it just that you just have questions, or are you ready to call this a scandal?
You want to jump in? Well, we know that the we controversy represents a scandal, but we need more answers to these questions about this $56 million contract before we will use that word. We're being very judicious in our choice of words, but right now we want answers to these questions. We're going to use our committee powers and the lobbying commissioner to get those answers.
One scandal I'd like to get your take on, and I don't think the Conservative Party has really spoken about this, is the one involving the Governor General. CBC has done some reporting about allegations of a toxic workplace and spending that a lot of Canadians probably are not comfortable with. Do you have anything to say about that?
I had the opportunity to take a question on that issue from one of your colleagues actually at a previous avail, and maybe that was all that we've said to this point about it. But nothing has changed in that respect. Every Canadian is entitled to a workplace that is free from harassment, intimidation, any inappropriate behavior, and certainly Canada's public servants are entitled to that. The office of the Governor General and her and their staff, it should be revered by everyone in Canada. Certainly, as Canadians, we hold the role of the vice-regal close to our hearts. It's our connection to our past. In this case, these allegations have exposed a failure, a breakdown in the system where people who had concerns, legitimate concerns, were not able to have them remedied by someone outside of the individuals with whom they were making the complaints against. So this is one of the things that Parliament should be looking at. One of the reasons why, with so much going on, that the official opposition did call for Parliament to sit this summer. This is one of those issues that could be examined. Now, PCO has said that they're launching an investigation, but it's also a larger question of what those mechanisms are that are in place with respect to the spending that's gone on. We have concerns about any time we hear about unnecessary or imprudent spending by people who hold public office, and we've seen that this summer when we found out that the Prime Minister was having a mansion built in secret at Harrington Lake. I tabled an order paper question on that. The response that I got versus the access to information response that the Canadian Taxpayers Federation got, we got different numbers to the same question, and they lowballed the answer to me and gave a higher number to the CTF, and so we have concerns when there's excess being spent, when Canadians before the pandemic were on the verge, a couple $100 away. More than half of Canadians were a couple $100 away from bankruptcy, and so when we hear about hundreds of thousands of dollars in expenses for luxuries or for things that, maybe don't even make a whole lot of sense, extra staircases and things like that, I think that deserves public scrutiny. This is exactly the kind of thing that, parliamentary committees like Public Accounts should be taking a look at. And so there's going to be a stream of work opened up for parliamentary committees as a result of that. And now we're going to have to see what the process that PCO has launched will uncover with respect to the issues concerning the work environment at Rideau Hall. The process for appointing the Governor General is done on the advice of the Prime Minister by Her Majesty the Queen, and that the terms of that are constitutionally set. And at this point, there's a process that's unfolding that is going to determine the veracity and severity of the claims that have been made. And once that investigation, that process has concluded, then it'll be a good time for us to consider next steps. Thanks.
Now back to the phone. Operator, do we have a next question?
We have another question from Mary-Kay Walsh from the Globe and Mail. Nous avons une autre question de Mary-Kay Walsh, Globe and Mail.
Just wanted to go back to the documents that we had initially expected this weekend. Are you concerned that the NDP motion, which allows for redactions from the law clerk as well as the Parliamentary Council, like could we be weeks away from getting these documents, or are you expecting them sooner?
We don't know. We've asked. They have not given us a timeline. I am a little worried that some of the wording in the motion might have encouraged the government to err on the side of secrecy. The Prime Minister abused the concept of cabinet confidence during the SNC-Lavalin scandal. It would not be beyond him to do it again. So we want the law clerk to tell us, we want to know, at least see how many redactions there were. And we may ultimately ask for members of Parliament from each party to swear an oath and view those redactions in private to make sure that nothing was redacted that should have been made public.
And though, are you concerned that, like, the motion from the committee is for further redactions based on whatever, on, privacy, even for civil servants? So, there could be even more redactions not made by the government, but by the actual House staff.
Yes, I am concerned about that. I would just simply say, though, that Parliament is supreme and committees are their own masters. So if the law clerk or the bureaucracy redact things that should be made public, then we will ultimately have the power to unredact. So I would just encourage everyone who's involved in this redaction process, be alert, because we will, at some point, if we're not comfortable with what you've done, we might unredact that information. We expect that we're going to get all the documents, every single piece of paper. Some of it will be blacked out allegedly for personal information, privacy, and cabinet confidences. But we have the power to assign members of Parliament to view those redactions in private and ascertain if, in fact, they were justified. If they are not, then we can use our opposition majority to unredact them and make all of it public.